So with that, good evening and welcome to the Town Board of the Town of Austin work session for Tuesday, August 3rd. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I thought that we were done sharing and starting announcements with COVID-19 updates, but unfortunately, again, I have no idea where to look. Okay, there we go. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a changing landscape once again. As you can see, my board colleagues and I are following CDC guidance this evening by wearing our masks in this public setting of our town board workroom. And as I mentioned, I'll keep mine off as I'm reading, but I will put them back on as I'm listening. Masks are now required to be worn in public spaces in town and village of Austin owned buildings for both visitors and employees, regardless of vaccination status. As we see case numbers ticking up across the country and locally, plus recent data which indicates that breakthrough cases of the Delta variant among vaccinated people are just as contagious as unvaccinated people, adding masks back to our arsenal of defenses against COVID-19 is a smart move. Please, if you have not yet been vaccinated, help us all, help you stay safe by doing so now. All 3 approved vaccines in the United States are effective against infection and nearly always effective against severe illness and death. Hospitals across the country are unfortunately filling up once again with COVID-19 patients, but in almost all cases, those hospitalized are unvaccinated. Do your part to slow the spread of COVID-19 and protect yourself and your family by getting vaccinated as soon as possible. Most pharmacies offer walk-in appointments, and the Austin Volunteer Ambulance Corps, OVAC, is vaccinating at their headquarters on Clinton Avenue on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you have questions about the vaccine, www.vaxupwestchester.org is an excellent resource for facts. And the Westchester County Department of Health has also set up a phone line for residents to speak one-on-one with nurses and doctors about the vaccine. All 3 of them, actually. Call 914-995-5800 to be connected with a healthcare professional in either English or Espanol to ask questions. Please get your facts from verified sources like healthcare providers. We know, and the data shows that these vaccines save lives with extremely, extremely low risk for serious negative side effects. The county has ongoing vaccine clinics at 20 South Broadway in Yonkers and 134 Court Street in White Plains for COVID-19 vaccines and back-to-school vaccines for eligible young children. The Yonkers Clinic is open Mondays and Thursdays from 4 to 7 p.m. and the White Plains Clinic is open Fridays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Call in advance for an appointment for back-to-school vaccines at 914-995-5800, but walk-ins for COVID-19 vaccines are welcome. Before I go any further, I also wanted to just add another kind of pertinent reminder. Councilman Meyer is actually joining us via Zoom this evening. Late this afternoon, Councilman Meyer learned that he may have had a secondary exposure to someone who tested positive for COVID-19. While Councilman Meyer is fully vaccinated, as we have been learning lately, as I've just discussed, it does not mean that he's necessarily immune, or any vaccinated people are necessarily immune from contracting COVID-19, and especially the more contagious Delta variant. What it does mean, however, is that for the vast majority of vaccinated people who come down with COVID-19, they will either be asymptomatic or have more mild symptoms than those who are not vaccinated, as I previously mentioned. Therefore, we continue to encourage everyone who's not vaccinated to do so. Just FYI, as recently as this morning, I reached out to our representatives in the state legislature to come up with a solution to continue to allow fully remote meetings, especially as COVID-19 numbers continue to rise in Westchester, and therefore we at this table would have to wear masks. As this is a work session where the board will not be taking any definitive action and a quorum of the board is present at Town Hall this evening, we will proceed with our work session agenda with Councilman Meyer participating via Zoom. We wish you good luck, Councilman Meyer, and look forward to seeing you in person soon, or better yet, please tell your boss. we want them to go back into special session. Oh, wait, I'm not even done. I don't want to finish that on. So that they can get that legislation passed to allow us to have these remote meetings. We have a 2-concert weekend planned for you, starting Friday, August 6th, with a performance by Drew Bordeaux and Friends, who is fantastic and played for us last year during COVID for remote concerts. So that is scheduled for Friday night. And then on Sunday, August 8th, we have the Sleepy Hollow String Band that was supposed to play earlier in the summer, and this is their Rain Out Makeup. Friday's concert will start at 7 p.m. and Sundays will start at 5 p.m., but make sure to get there a little earlier, as in 2 hours, for the food trucks and craft beverage corral service, starting at 5 on Fridays and 3 on Sunday. The food truck lineup will be featuring some Food Truck Fridays or Sundays faves, including Brothers Fish and Chips, Rapper's Delight, Azodi Street Food, and more. I did hear that there was going to be a pizza coming this weekend, so this Friday night, I'm looking forward to that. Sing Sing Hill Brewery will be pouring alongside Peekskill Brewery on Friday night and Soul Brewing Company on Sunday afternoon. We will post and share the final lineup later in the week. Make sure you are following the Town of Austin and Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce on Facebook for the latest updates, and definitely come hungry on Friday and Sunday. Thank you to our amazing summer concerts and Food Truck Fridays planning team of the Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce, Sing Sing Hill Brewery, Mike and Miriam Risco, and Superintendent Breck Bill Garrison. We hope to see you there. And don't forget about the summer entertainment series on Tuesdays in Austin Parks and the summer acoustic series on Wednesdays in Market Square. Both series are wrapping up next week. The CDC guidance for mask wearing currently does not have protocols for outdoor events, but we ask that everyone exercise caution and wear masks, especially if you're not vaccinated. And for young children who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated, while you're up and about. And actually, we're suggesting that everybody, vaccinated or not, wear a mask when they're walking around. We want to keep the summer fun going all summer long, but it's contingent upon all of us doing our part to slow the spread of COVID. Public outreach for the comprehensive plan continues as we near the release of a draft comprehensive plan. We're seeking additional community feedback in an effort to highlight some of the larger policies and ideas to be discussed in the draft plan. The plan will continue to incorporate the input from the summer engagement into the final guide for the initiatives and policies for the town to consider for further planning and development as defined in the plan. The steering committee members will be using posters as an easy way to engage people in this conversation and to make sure people stay informed as to when the draft comprehensive plan is released. So if you happen to see a steering committee member at an event this summer or stationed at a local business with engagement posters, colored stickies, please take a moment to say hi and respond to the activities so that we can hear from you. We're looking forward to sharing the final result with the community, so stay tuned. Please note the Community Equity Task Force meeting for August 5th has been canceled. We will be back with regular meetings in the fall. If you'd like to get involved in this community coalition, please send me an email at dlevenberg@townofaustin.com and we will add you to the distribution list to learn of future meetings and events. You may have seen on the news that the federal moratorium on evictions expired at the end of July, although I think that President Biden just announced an extension.
Yeah,
right?
it's been extended in most areas of the country for another 60 days.
So it's been extended in most areas of the country for another 60 days. The New York State eviction moratorium remains in effect, but please remember that the New York State Emergency Rental Assistance Program is ongoing and offers assistance to households behind on rent. Apply today at nysrenthelp.otda.ny.gov or visit westchestergov.com/housing-help, or simply dial, here's the easy one, 211 to get help with your application. New York State also has funds available to provide financial help to New Yorkers who lost income during the pandemic and were otherwise ineligible for other federal relief programs through the Excluded Workers Fund via DOL for Department of Labor.ny.gov/EWF for more information. This pandemic has been challenging for many. I would have to say for all. But please remember, there is a lot of help out there for families experiencing financial hardship at this time. Finally, I would like to take a moment to address the news coming out of Albany today regarding the Attorney General's investigation of allegations against Governor Cuomo for sexual harassment and sexual assault. The results of the investigation are troubling at best and illustrate that New Yorkers deserve much better. I join many of my colleagues in county and state government in urging Governor Cuomo to accept the results of the Attorney General's investigation and resign. We can and should do better, and this type of behavior against women cannot and should not be tolerated. We're grateful for the women who stepped up to speak out. Do my work colleagues have anything to add? Councilman Meyer? Can't see. My glasses. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. All right, so with that, first up tonight, we have our nutrition site manager zooming in, Lynn Muller, for her very first departmental report since taking the reins of the department earlier in the year. Adjusting to the ever-changing landscape of the pandemic has been no small task, so we are grateful to Lynn and her entire team for their very hard work and dedication to our seniors. Lynn, please fill us in as to what has been going on with our seniors so far this year and what you're looking forward to in the months ahead with our fingers tightly crossed. You have to unmute. You have to unmute. Okay.
Better.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Nice to finally see you all. The year's been quite a challenge, trying to keep the seniors safe, first and foremost. And I have to say, we've been working all through the pandemic. And as far as I know, not one of our seniors has come down with COVID. We have lost some, but not due to COVID. So we're pretty happy about that. We've had to open and then close again and try to open again and close again. And right now we're open 2 days a week. They've been coming in to eat and actually eating at the center 2 days a week, but we keep them there for a very short time and then send them home, and they're thrilled. They're dying to get out and see people. Now we've got the mask situation again, so I don't know how that's going to affect eating, and we're still trying to wait and see what happens with that. We might only have to have them come in and socialize for a little while and keep their masks on and then take their food home to eat. We did have to do that for a while. We may have to do that for a little while. Right now we're keeping it small like that because all the kids are coming into the rec center for camps. So we're trying to keep them separated and everybody safe. So when they come in, our seniors are upstairs, and once camp stops, then we're hoping to bring the seniors downstairs. Our goal is sometime in September. We were hoping right after Labor Day, before all this happened again, to reopen fully 5 days a week and have everybody come in full time, get back to exercise schedules and shopping and all our old activities. We're trying to add new activities. We're trying to bring in new seniors, a little more active, younger seniors, and trying to just do more activities and get more of the community involved. In the past, it's been mostly elderly people that we have some, but the majority of them don't really want to go out and do as much. And we're trying to involve more of the more active community also, so we can go do different things and just try and keep them active in their mind and physically. So we're looking forward to hopefully expanding a bit when we're able to, and hopefully it's still going to be September. We keep positive thinking and hoping that's what'll happen. So keep your fingers crossed, everybody.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Just a
welcome.
quick question. I know that there is an outdoor space at the community center, so maybe in good weather, like if we know that it's going to be decent, not too hot, not too cool in the fall, maybe we can still have some meals together.
Right.
Outdoor space.
Yeah, we would like to do that. We're trying, when they're upstairs now, there is that little area that's enclosed upstairs. And sometimes when the weather's not been that great, it's either raining or it's too hot, or for the 2 days that they're there. But they do have gone out and sat out there, and some of them will take their lunch and eat out there, which is really nice. But hopefully when if we get it more people in, we're hoping to utilize some outdoor space more. and have them eat outside, and, you know, it's nice. It's just a change. It's brighter, it's fresh air. Who doesn't like that? I mean, so try and do that.
Fantastic. Do any of my board colleagues have any questions?
Thanks for rolling with the changes and keeping our seniors safe.
We're trying.
Just thank you. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thanks for
right.
coming out this evening and or staying in, I guess, as we could say, right?
Okay, yeah. All right,
Okay.
take care, everyone.
Okay, have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
So next up, we have Gareth Huffam, who happens to be our planning board chair, but also has a great interest in the health of our waterways, including the mighty Hudson. Gareth has been assisting the town with data collection for water quality testing at the Lewis Engle Park Beach, and we are hopeful that the data collected will help us determine next steps forward to opening the beach to swimming in future seasons. Gareth, please take us through your work to date. We have our fingers crossed for good news. And you do have to unmute.
Let me try to share my screen. 1 sec. And can you see this first slide?
Not
Not
yet,
yet.
not yet.
Not yet? Oh,
No, you cannot.
what are you seeing?
You,
Nothing.
well, just the people.
Really? It should be showing.
Make sure after you hit share screen, Gareth, make sure you select the window you want to open and hit share again.
I think that was it.
There we go.
Oh. Hang on.
We see kids on the beach. We don't see the presentation. There we go.
All right.
All right, seeing the first page?
Yes.
Great, okay. And let me get a laser pointer. Can you see the little laser pointer?
Yes.
Right, okay. Good evening. As Dana said, my name is Gareth Huffam, and I'm with an Ossining-based nonprofit called Hudson Valley Stream Conservancy. And thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the work we're doing looking at the water quality. We're doing a water quality study in the town of Ossining Beach on the Hudson River. This work was initiated by the town of Ossining, and I'm helping out with it. So we can go to, and I think you'll all recognize the beach, which is widely used for kayaking currently. So let me show you the second slide, which is a satellite image of the whole Ossining waterfront, and point out a few things. So here in the middle, in the lower middle, you see the Ossining Beach, the Lewis Engle Park Beach. It's this little corner. Over to the extreme upper left is the sewage treatment plant, otherwise known as the Ossining Wastewater Treatment Plant. And the effluent from that, the treated effluent from that plant comes out about where you see this square. And it goes in two different directions, depending on which way the tide is going. So that's their effluent point. Way over on the right-hand side, you'll see the Sing Sing Kill. And it too is a potential source of sewage that could impact the beach. And it's shown here as sending effluent in all directions. And keep this image in mind for later. Next slide here shows a blow up of the Ossining Beach, just so you can get a better image. It's just this tan area in the center. Over to the right and over to the left of that is rocky riprap. If I go to the next slide, I'll talk about sampling on the beach. This is a photograph of me taking a sample a couple of weeks ago. And all of the samples that we take are taken to the Westchester County Laboratory in Valhalla, and they're in New York State ELAP certified independent lab. We've taken 41 samples to date, most of them at the beach, but some at the sewage treatment plant and some at Sing Sing Kill. We've been given requirements by the Westchester County Public Health for what the water quality and other requirements are for public swimming at a Hudson River beach. And the first and foremost is that the water quality is safe for swimming. And the way they define that is that the geometric average of the bacteria sampling has to be less than 35 Enterococcus colonies per 100 milliliter jar. Okay, that's what we use, 100 milliliter jars. And they have told us that a minimum, at a minimum, we have to sample for 8 weeks during this warm season, including at least 1 week where we sample every single day that includes a rain event. So ideally, the week would start with no rain, then there'd be a big rain event, and then no rain again, so we can really see how the water quality responds to a rain event. Other requirements for swimming at the beach are things like lifeguards being on duty, roped areas with floating lines, the shower and bathroom facilities, among a few others. We are only dealing with the water quality issue, because if the water quality is found to be insufficient, then this whole project gets, the whole idea of public swimming has to get shelved until there are mitigation efforts. However, if the results are positive, meaning that all the values are below that threshold, then the town of Ossining can go forward with next steps to try to get permitting if the board so desires. This just shows some of the where the regulations come from. It's New York State Sanitary Code. And this is an image of a typical tide cycle. The tides are always about 12 hours apart. There's some variation. And this was the tide down there today. And you can see that high tide to high tide, like I said, is about 12 hours apart. So high tide to low tide is about 6 hours apart. If you look at just from one high tide to the next high tide, you realize that if we sample within that stretch, we can get representative samples of all tide conditions. And the next slide just sort of shows a slice. So this is really all we need to sample within to understand how the tides affect our water quality. And so high tide here at the left, low tide in the middle, high tide. And keep this image in mind, because when I show you some data in a little while, keep that in mind. High tide on the left, low tide in the middle, high tide on the right. This is the image of what's happening when the tide is coming in with respect to the two potential sewage sources. So if you look at the upper left, the sewage treatment plant effluent point is now, the arrow is pointing right. So as the tide comes in, sewage from the effluent comes down toward the beach. At the same time, if you look at the upper right, as the tide is coming in, the Sing Sing Kill effluent is sent off north up around Croton Point. So it has no influence on the Ossining Beach with the incoming tide. Go to the next slide, we see what it looks like when the tide is going out. So over at the sewage treatment plant, the effluent is now going away from the beach, it's going south, and the effluent from the Sing Sing Kill is now coming directly into this Ossining Cove and will affect the beach. Now, with those in mind, I want to show you some initial data. So we're only about halfway through that minimum 8-week sampling period. So this is preliminary data, but it's already showing us a picture of what we can expect. So let me first orient you to this slide. So on the x-axis, we have time since the last high tide. So at 0 hours, we have a high tide. It goes up to 6 hours, that's a low tide. And again, 12 hours, that's another high tide. And if you look on the y-axis, we have the number of bacterial colonies per 100 milliliter jar that we take. And we have two data sets here. In blue, we have data that we've taken when there had been no rain or no significant rain within 48 hours. And in orange, we have data taken when, yes, there was a significant rain within 48 hours. So if we look at the graph at the blue dots and line, you can see that when there's been no rain, the values are always well below that threshold of 35 bacterial colonies. So that's great news. And so, you know, whenever it's dry weather, we would probably pass the Department of Health criteria. However, if there's been a rain event, you can see that even at high tides, the values are still always high, above that threshold of 35. And then as you go to a low tide, when the Sing Sing Kill effluent is swinging into the beach, the numbers become really very high. In fact, they go off scale, very high indeed. And that's because the Sing Sing Kill is indeed very dirty, has a lot of sewage in it. And so when the tide comes back in, you can see the values drift back down, but again, still never quite make it to below threshold values. So if the data after 8 weeks looks similar to this, you know, we'll be adding a lot of points to this, so it won't look so noisy. If it looks like this, I think that the town will get permission to go forward. However, you know, we can't tell what the data is going to look like until we measure it. So I would say that this presents a hopeful picture for being able to get permitting from a water quality point of view. Next slide. So tentative conclusions: dry weather, I think we're okay. Wet weather, we're not okay. Sewage treatment plant in Ossining appears not to be a problem for water quality, but it is a problem for smells.
I can't reach you though.
Excuse me?
I can't reach you right now. Mommy's on TV. See, mommy's on TV.
I'm sorry, I can't. Well, there's a baby talking. Sorry. Lastly, the Sing Sing Kill stream is the main source of the raw sewage that pushes wet weather values higher. And next steps will be to continue sampling for 4 more weeks. Then we write a draft report, we review with Westchester County Board of Health and see where we stand. We might actually try to have a preliminary meeting with them. So in case we're missing something or they want more of one kind of data, you know, one type of sampling over another, we'll have time to fill that in. If they give us the go-ahead from a water quality point of view, then the town of Ossining can decide if you want to apply for 2022 swim season permits. And with that, I also just want to take a second and acknowledge the town of Ossining for initiating the study and for funding the certified laboratory costs. Also an anonymous donor for funding all other costs, the Hudson Valley Stream Conservancy lab supplies, because we run some samples in our own laboratory just to double check the certified lab, and they've matched very well, I'm happy to say. Ice and gas and some other expenses. So that's all being handled by this anonymous donor in memory of Calvin Henninger, who was an town of Ossining resident, lived here in Crotonville, and he learned to swim in the Hudson and Croton rivers. And he went on to represent the U.S. Navy in competitive swimmer. swimming. And we're in Crotonville, we're very proud of Calvin, and we lost him just a couple of years ago. Want to thank Westchester County Wastewater Facility. They've been very cooperative and helpful in letting us take samples of their effluent. And I'd like to thank Riverkeeper and Ossining High School because they've both done really nice work with earlier water quality studies on the beach, which will eventually present all together to the Board of Health with our study. So I'm happy to take some questions, and sorry if that ran over the 5 minutes that I was allotted.
We gave you 5 because we knew you were gonna run over.
What was that?
Thanks, Garrett. No, that's great. That was really helpful and very appreciative of your time and all your knowledge that you brought to help us get this started. I think that, one of the questions that as you look at the data, even if you know that the averages are going to be okay, and you know that you get an okay from the county, I think one of the questions would be, well, what happens on these bad days, like after a rain? And I think, and maybe some of my colleagues know that they do shut Croton Point down when there are events, right? So theoretically, we could open the beach and then we would close it on bad weather days or days, shortly after a big rainstorm when we think that the numbers would tick up.
Exactly. And I believe that's actually the policy of the Westchester County Board of Health for their Hudson River swimming, that they require shutdowns after rain events. I think they shut for 48 hours, but it might only be 24. I'm not 100% sure about what they require.
So do my colleagues have any questions for Garrett or anything to say?
That's the only question I have.
Okay.
All right, that's one thing. So Sing Kill obviously is a problem. Are these coming more? I know you know the Sing Kill very well, so I feel comfortable asking you this. Do you think it's coming more from septic systems overflowing or faulty sewage pipes?
It's an excellent question, and I wish I could answer. We spent the entire summer of 2016 on a New York State DEC grant studying the Sing Kill, every inch of it, and all of its branches, and testing the water quality all the way along, looking for evidence of where the sewage was coming from. And we did find a few hot spots, but no real smoking gun like a big broken pipe. The hot spots we found were relatively localized, they weren't high volume. And so it remains a little bit of a mystery, to tell you the truth. We did do a follow-up study where we plotted the locations of septic systems. Those are mostly in the upper stream system. So if I were to guess, based on what I think I know, I would say both failing septic systems, because they were many of them were old systems, before the sewer service was put into some of those areas, but also potentially broken smaller line pipes, not like a mainline pipe, but probably smaller line pipes. But cumulatively, it's a lot. And I think that it would be a very good idea for the town of Ossining, and ideally the village of Ossining as well, since you both have the Sing Kill in common, to get a grant to bring in professionals to locate those sources. And there are engineering firms that specialize in doing that. And I would recommend seeking a grant to do that. Once they're known, the mitigation is easy and generally not horribly expensive, as long as it's not a main line. But it's finding those sources that's the trouble.
Okay, and do you know if any of these upticks are from our stormwater system, from things like people not picking up after their dogs or whatever?
So that's another good question. It is generally known in the industry or the water quality community that the first part of major rainstorm events washes, the streets out, and dog waste that people have left, in the street, and also wild animal waste, especially like Canada geese, washes into the system, and that does make a very high initial blast of enterococcus and coliform. But that it looks like it's not just that, because that initial wash it doesn't decline quickly like we would think that it would. The only way to really tell the difference is to do what they call environmental DNA studies, or eDNA, where you can tell the difference between coliforms and enterococcus that come from humans and when it comes from different animals. But that's another level of study that we're not equipped to do, but could be done.
I hear science research.
There you go.
This might be suggested a grant.
Yes. No, but I'm saying get the kids to do it, like with a mentor or something like that, which is similar,
Yeah.
same kind of thing, but with a, a lab or a college or something like that, or, anyway. Any other questions? Do you have any questions?
I look forward to seeing how the remaining study comes out. Think about how we can maybe make a difference in the numbers for grants. That would be great. Nothing at this time. Thank you.
No. Councilman Meyer, do you have any questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, again, Mr. Hoffman, thank you very much for that excellent and detailed report. And I think you give us a good scope of, what we are looking at ahead and how we might get there. I just want to reiterate that many people are concerned about those swimming at the beach. On a regular basis, we have no swimming signs up at the beach. It is not illegal to swim at the beach, but it is not recommended by the county. It's not approved use of that space. Obviously, we know many people do swim in the Hudson River a little farther out, whether it's by the canoe club or off of their boats or etc. But it's not recommended. We don't have a lifeguard there. We don't believe it's safe to swim there right now. We'd like to make it safe. However, once again, it is not illegal to do so. So people basically are swimming at their own risk. Okay, so I think that is it for Mr. Hoffman. Thank you again so much for this evening, and we will see you soon. Next up, we have a proposal from Local Blue. We recently had a change in staffing in the supervisor's office. So we decided to use this opportunity, as we usually do, following a resignation or retirement, to evaluate the most cost-effective way to fill the resulting gap in services, which does not always mean replacing the vacated position outright. My staff and I considered a few options, and with the board's blessing, have since put in place contractual solutions to assist with grant writing and communications, two of the primary job responsibilities of the vacated position. This just leaves community engagement on social media and with community partners through initiatives like the Community Equity Task Force. We considered a few options, but having recently received a proposal from Local Blue Solutions for social media, communications, community partnerships, and the Community Equity Task Force, which seems to fit the bill at an approximately equal cost to the former staff member, potentially with some savings to the taxpayers, we thought that we should consider it. Acacia Moriello from Local Blue Solutions is here with us tonight to share with the board her proposal for our consideration. In the interest of full disclosure, Acacia did volunteer during the primary season on my campaign and has worked with the Ossining Democratic Committee since January on similar tasks. My experience with Acacia leads me to believe she would bring so much to the table, as I have witnessed firsthand her ability to engage others in the democratic process, especially in her own community of Ossining. We have a responsibility in the 21st century to meet our constituents where they are. And for many, this takes place on social media and in other forms of electronic communication. With the current vacancy in my office, we are not able to keep up with this vital task as we should, and Acacia's proposal would help fill that gap. I'm also familiar with comparable offerings from other firms and organizations like, for example, Pace Land Use Law Center, who is assisting us with the comp plan outreach. And as such, I know that the proposal from Acacia is both cost efficient and provides unparalleled services from an engaged community member, which truly goes a long way. So with that, welcome Acacia. I know you're usually behind the Zoom screen watching our meeting, so it's great to have you as a panelist this evening. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. And I hope I wasn't off mute for too long. I did notice my son was playing around a little bit with my computer. Apologies for that. So usually he likes to listen to the board meetings with me, and he sits in my lap, but obviously we're going to try not to do that tonight. Basically, can everyone see my screen and sort of what I'm going? I didn't want to do like death by PowerPoint, but I did want to have some slides just to sort of anchor the discussion, but obviously wanted to leave most of the time for questions from folks.
I don't think we're seeing your screen occasion. You're not sharing.
Sorry?
What are we seeing? What are we supposed to be seeing?
Is it just the scope of work boxes?
Yes, okay,
Yeah,
we can see them, but I can't see them.
They're
through my
very
glasses.
small.
I see, okay. Yeah, maybe can we make her just,
Yeah, hold on.
okay, hold on 1 second. So that we can see you. Right now we see lots of little boxes, so. There we go. Okay, now we can see, yes.
All right, so basically I just wanted to, again, didn't want to do death by PowerPoint. Just wanted to have a few slides to sort of anchor the discussion. But again, wanted to make sure to leave lots of time and space for questions. So thank you, Dana, for that introduction and also for the opportunity to present to the board, just to discuss sort of what we're thinking here. So first, I just wanted to go over sort of the scope of the work, which Dana's pretty much covered. So I didn't want to beat to death, but essentially the thinking is we want to make sure that we're continuing to engage the community at a high level and see if we can improve that and bring new voices into the conversation, looking at sort of the lay of the landscape right now. We have there's a solid cadre of like really engaged residents, around like 2,000. And there's definitely more people that we need to reach, that we want to make sure that are getting information. So we want to, continue moving forward and thinking about strategic ways that we can continue to expand our reach and engage all residents. So the thinking behind that is continued presence and improved engagement on social media, regular communication such as the press releases and things like that. And we'll work a little bit on the community partnerships and ensuring that we're maintaining the relationships that we have for programming like Mind, Body, Spirit and whatnot, and also seeing if there's other partners that can be brought into the fold. And then the Community Equity Task Force piece sort of presents itself as like a consulting project, if you will. The town is really trying to be intentional about how we address certain issues and making sure that all residents are sharing in all the benefits of living in Ossining equally. And so there's been a few efforts like the survey and some outreach and things like that. But definitely there's an opportunity to think about and really focus in on what are our goals with that group? What are our goals with this work overall? And see if we can clarify the charge and scope of that group to make it as effective and actually produce some measurable results and move the needle somewhat. So there's some work that needs to be done. It seems to look more closely at that and see where we can make some progress in these particular things. So with that said, why am I the person to do that? That would be a good question. So I thought I'd pop in a slide about who I am, especially since I'm a new-ish resident. I've lived in Ossining for about 4 years, or yeah, this will be my, this is finishing up my 4th summer here. And so I moved here because I love the community. Looked awesome from the outside. And, you know, as we've continued to live here, we've come to love it more and more. So I've been, you know, alert and attuned to ways that I can try to, you know, be more involved and engaged and, you know, work to sort of build on, there's lots of promise and a lot of different things, and there's a lot of forward movement and progress happening. Just kind of want to be part of it. So about me and my professional experience, education, I got my undergrad degree at Wesleyan. I work at Manhattan College, and sort of my other hobby is getting master's degrees. So I just finished one in organizational leadership not too long ago. And I'm also working on an MBA, which I expect to finish in 2023. So that's where I'm at there. And I have academic and professional experience in public opinion research. My first job out of college, I worked for Edison Research, doing like the exit poll and things like that. So a lot of experience there, a lot of data collection and analysis, student success. Most of my professional experience has been in the field of education, but a lot of different roles and a lot of different types of engagement there. I also do a lot of assessment work in my current role, and a lot of other things. My mom says I can cart my resume around in a wheelbarrow. So I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, or if you want to dig in deeper into that. In particular, a common thread that runs through my work experience, though, is data collection and analysis, as I mentioned, and that's sort of one of the things we want to bring to this work. We don't want to just be doing things like, oh yeah, we should have a social media page, so you know, let's just throw one up there and hope that it helps with something. I really, as a taxpayer, would like to make sure that, you know, anything that we're doing, we're thinking about how we can do it well, thinking about how we can improve outcomes and things like that. So I definitely bring an eye toward assessment. Anytime I start a project, I think about how we can assess it, if whether or not it was successful, whether or not it's achieving its intended goals. And so that's sort of where that stuff sort of comes into play as we're thinking about this work. So I should maybe pause for questions, or does anybody want to talk a little bit more about the work itself before we get into like the value and then the sort of open discussion?
I have one question about the types of assessments that you would be doing, because I'm very interested in the whole, this is the goal, have we reached the goal, that kind of outcomes kind of look. So I'm very interested in that.
Sure. So for social media, definitely number one, we'd want to look at just like, you know, the basic analytics, you know, the sort of in the box things that are there. So are we reaching more people? How many people are we reaching? You know, things like that, things like sharing and stuff like that. But also to thinking about if we're serving people well, doing things like semantic analysis. So one of the things that I do at work is we use NVivo to look and see not just, you know, we do a lot of quantitative analysis of like, okay, we can have a conversation about higher ed and all the data we do there, but the relation here would be not just looking at the raw numbers of who's engaging with what, but what sorts of things are they saying? Are there opportunities or are there places where we need to be sharing more information, better educating people about different topics? Something that we would be able to see from semantic analysis would be, for example, you know, levels of positive and negative engagement, but also seeing where are gaps in information, where is misinformation perhaps spreading, where is there an opportunity for us to be doing better at being more proactive about sharing things, because we know that when people don't have information, a lot of times they'll just fill in that void with anything. So we want to make sure that we're, you know, getting people the information they need in order to, you know, be happy about where they live and understand, you know, where their dollars are going and how, you know, everything's being run. And we also want to make sure that, you know, this is a, you know, healthy, happy civil community where people feel like they, where people can feel good about, you know, raising their children and doing all those things that, you know, we know that a lot of people move to Ossining for, but we also, you know, occasionally you see lots of other things just bubbling up, and you want to make sure that you're serving people in such a way that they're understanding and feeling, good and connected to the community. I hope that answers so that's a social media question. I would also look at, for example, with the Community Equity Task Force. So we do have this survey. The first thing we want to do is improve the response rate. And there were a couple of other little things in the survey instrument itself that we want to take a look at in terms of the questions and things like that. But also, to the extent possible, digging into data that we have about where there may be, where we can see, for example, what sorts of inequities we may have in terms of, or disparities between who is, renting versus owning, what sorts of experiences are people having, and then also getting more into what sorts of things, where does the town actually have leverage over certain these issues, and where should the town be acting more, and where is it more of a state issue, where is it more just baked in societal, some of these things we're not necessarily going to have a whole lot of leverage over. Basically seeing where a group like this can be most effective, and then sort of moving in that direction, as opposed to just sort of having conversations about broad things, which is useful and is a good thing to be doing, sort of like a book club style thing. But if we really want to move the needle, we need to sort of really look closely at data and think about, where specifically can the town have leverage in terms of addressing equity issues. So that would be sort of the approach there, actually getting into like a deep dive on the available data that we have, and then thinking about the leverage we can have, and then seeing, okay, should this be sort of a group that basically really clarifying that charge once we figured out where a group like this can be most effective at addressing these issues.
Thank you.
How many people are in your group? Or is it just you?
So I wanted to start an LLC just because I like to, just for like limited liability, just to, not have a, in case anything happens, anytime I do a business venture. I've had businesses in the past and I formed an LLC. So really it's just me and my husband, generally. And I've had a business before, and I sort of cut him in just to make sure that, really your partner is always your business partner. So that's just sort of how we run things, but it's really just me and with, occasional assist from my husband at the moment, because again, this is, sort of, we're looking at this on the side. I do have a full-time job that I love, but I also really love the town and want to, I have this certain set of skills that seem really well suited to the work that needs doing right now. So this seemed like a really good opportunity to do that. But there, who knows where things could go in the future. So
All right. Is
it's more of
helping too?
Always.
Okay, so we is you and your husband, and what's his business? Or is he
I'm
helping? You? So if we is you and your husband, when you say we, and I understand mainly it's you, and you seem to have a great background, does your husband bring something extra to the table, or he's just supporting you in all the other different ways that he could?
He's supporting me in logistics. It's really, so again, the purpose of having the LLC is really just to be doing business as such, so that,
It protects you, now I get it.
It's not like I am in effect like a sole proprietor. But again, your partner is always, I always think of it like right now, for example, he's wrangling my children. He probably heard just one of them run inside, and that enables me to do things like make presentations. So
yeah, I apologize. You just keep saying we, so I thought it was a bigger group, so I apologize.
no worries.
Continue.
Got it. Okay, so do you want to keep on?
Sure. Oh, I think also too, just to clarify, when I was saying we, I was also thinking about the people, for example, if I'm working with the, with the town, with the community task force and stuff like that, that's sort of more where I went we, with other people who I'd be interfacing with as a part of this role, not necessarily like I'm, I have an army of people working behind me, because no, that's definitely not the case.
Okay, so misunderstanding.
All right. So then I wanted to briefly touch in on value. So as Dana mentioned, I definitely looked at, I know the town has also looked at different options they have. When I was personally setting up the fee structure that I was proposing, I looked at the following things for comparables. One would be social media agencies and consultants. Obviously for just post, a lot of times just for posting alone, you'll spend over $1,000 a month, and that's with no strategy. That's no boots on the ground doing anything. That's literally just somebody posting to your page. So already just in that one area alone, coming in well under that. Same with diversity and equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, sometimes diversity, equity, inclusion, justice. Consultants are definitely having a boom right now. But again, generally, when you're talking about consultants, I'll just look at the other comparables. Generally, and you're well aware of this, I know the town spends around $70,000 a year on consulting services, somewhere about there. And generally, consulting engagements are a lot more limited than what I'm able to bring as an engaged community resident. I'm around, I'm always in contact, I'm always accessible, and again, have background that a consultant who's coming in from the outside generally wouldn't. But the level of engagement is very different than, the lowest price, the 25th percentile, fresh out of undergrad communications consultant would be coming in, a tiny bit under where I'm proposing this for my, for the town here. But again, that's somebody who, would need a lot of help, would not be doing a whole lot, would not be doing the same level of work that I would be doing given my level of professional experience, but also my level of knowledge and engagement in the town. And also the village. I also attend, all these meetings. I read all the emails. I'm around and very immersed in what's going on in a way that a typical consultant would not be. So again, the pricing structure, which I sent over, a proposal sheet reflects that. The other comparable is, as the supervisor mentioned, a full-time staff member who was there. So that's the, paying not just that person's salary, but, healthcare and benefits and things like that. That being considered as a comparable, we're still, we still compare quite favorably on that end. And then the other thing to compare it to is obviously the cost of free. So a lot of times, especially when we're talking about things like social media is only one part of this. There's three other components that are much bigger, but especially when that's one of the components, I think sometimes people think that because social media is quote unquote free, that it's something that like, oh yeah, let's just get a high school student to do it. Or, there's lots of people doing these sorts of things, but one, it can get very tricky. There are definitely municipalities right now that are having issues because of things that community members, not just people who work for them, but that community members are posting about contentious issues and stuff like that. So it is, and when you think about, just the amount of time you have to spend bringing someone up to speed who maybe, doesn't have a certain depth of professional experience or things like that, free can cost a lot of money. Free can be very expensive if we're not able to, pay someone to look at things and be a little bit more careful and be a little bit more productive without a lot of hand-holding. Free, again, can be very expensive. So the way that I set this up, I definitely wanted to, provide a fee that would enable me to really show up for this and treat it like, a professional assignment. And so again, the fee structure sort of reflects that. It's each, work package that I've listed on the proposal sheet definitely reflects, okay, this is what it would cost in terms of, one, what you could possibly get from a comparable provider versus, what it would cost for me to do it, and the opportunity cost of, me doing that versus, working on something else or doing various things. So I really, put time into thinking about how we can structure this so that, I can show up and do my best work for the town, because again, I love the town, and I want to make sure that I can contribute as much as possible as we're doing things. So moving along, I don't want to take up too much time. I basically left a little spot for Q&A and also contact information in case anybody wanted to give me a call or send an email. Localbluesolutions.com was taken by somebody who wants like an enormous price for that URL. So it's localblue.solutions. And so if you wanted to email me on that address, it'd be info@localblue.solutions, but everything goes to my Gmail, which I think folks on the town board should have. So that's all, all right there, and you can reach me. But obviously right now we have time for questions as long as we have time. So that's pretty much.
Additional questions?
Maybe she has laryngitis.
Okay, we'll be the first town you're working with?
Hmm?
Will be the first town you're working with as your LLC?
Yes, definitely still in the process. Again, saw an opportunity to help out and also, it's sort of an idea I've had kicking around for a while, but this is definitely the first town that I'd be working with and the only. Again, I do have another job that I do love. It's just, looking at ways I can stay productive and, earn a little extra money.
Great, and what do you do for the college?
I'm a retention specialist. So basically, and this actually aligns pretty well with the community equity task force work. My job is basically thinking about how I can make bureaucracy work better for people who are underserved. And so, that's sort of where that idea of looking at data, thinking about where we can, what we actually have control over, what we can actually leverage to better serve people.
That's a good skill.
We do a lot of, again, assessment, engagement, data analysis, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Oh, any further questions? Any questions? Mr. Meyer, Councilman Meyer, do you have any questions?
No questions. I like the presentation. I like your emphasis on trying to help get the word out to some of our underserved communities. So thank you for that. And also, I appreciate hearing your kid in the background because usually it's my kid that everybody has to hear in the background.
Very true.
Actually, one more question. The Spanish language channels, can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. So basically, the idea is I just, I was looking around, I was like, okay, do we have Spanish language channels? I didn't really see one. Apart from obviously the police department in the village, has Spanish language channels, and we occasionally sprinkle in, translated content and things like that. But there isn't really like a dedicated one. Now I know that perhaps the demand for that isn't as great as it might be in the village, but I wanted to put that out there as something that we might think about if we are in fact losing folks or losing engagement because of a language barrier. And how that might work is, for example, if we determine that there's a need for one, if there's somebody already doing translation work, while we're doing the communications timeline, and again, the timeline and stuff like that is explained, we go into a little bit of that on the proposal sheet, but basically the idea would be either if there's in-house support for translation, I can work with that person to set up a channel that essentially mirrors the English language channels. So that'd be Facebook and Instagram. Or if that's something that we don't necessarily have support for, we being the town already having support for that, I could look at engaging someone to help populate that. So then there would be like another person in the we besides my husband sort of acting as like vice principal. It's basically principal and then vice principal.
Right, yeah, I think that's something you could use. Thank you.
Great. No more questions? Following the questions? Okay. Fantastic. So thank you so much, Akeisha. We're excited to hear your presentation, and hopefully the board will take action next week on your proposal. Appreciate it. So with that, we're going to our next work session topic, and that is outdoor dining. We are continuing a discussion tonight on a local law to allow temporary outdoor dining in the town of Austining to continue in light of the recent intensification of the pandemic and changes in state law. Council Tomadon, do you want to explain to the board what you incorporated into this draft local law?
Yes. So last August, the board adopted the original language for the temporary outdoor dining permit scheme, which is basically in the purview of the building inspector. And what it does is when there were occupancy restrictions on indoor dining in restaurants, it allowed restaurants to supplement with outdoor dining so that you were still not exceeding the maximum indoor capacity that would have been allowed but for the pandemic. But basically just providing an alternative in eating outside, which was being recommended as being safer, obviously being in the outdoor air, and also giving these businesses an opportunity to bring in additional patrons to try to keep afloat during what can only be called incredibly challenging times. The premise of the permit was that it was intended to be temporary because otherwise it's been determined that under the town code, site plan approval would be required. So there were a couple of elements that were incorporated into the original law to kind of keep that in check. One was that a permit could only be for 45 days maximum at a time, and establishments were allowed to get as many as they wanted. But if you did exceed more than 5 permits in a 12-month period, that indicated that it was intended to be a more permanent type of arrangement, in which case you should go back to the planning board and have them look at site plan issues, access, pedestrian, parking, those types of things that weren't really being considered on a temporary basis. The other aspect was that as part of your application, the restaurant had to demonstrate why, due to a risk to public health, safety, and welfare, the establishment cannot utilize any or all of its indoor dining space. So we're actually in the rapidly changing climate. When we had this conversation a few weeks ago, we were in a situation where the state of emergency had just ended. Everyone thought we were moving quickly onward and upward, and now we're here wearing masks. So you never know what situation you're going to be in from day to day, unfortunately, and sometimes we can try to be proactive. In this case, I think we're trying to be a little bit reactive, but in a way that will allow this to move forward in a fashion that I believe would be satisfactory to the town board based upon the discussion of the work session a few weeks ago, and also put an end in sight for this. So the reason why this originally came up was because, as I said, at the end of June, the governor announced that the state of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic would expire and that it was not going to be extended any further. That was at the end of June. Then at the beginning of July, there was a law that was enacted at the state level that pretty much codified one of the executive orders that had been put in place, which was one that allowed the state liquor authority to permit locations for outdoor food and beverage consumption in locations that were outside on municipal property or other private property. While that's not necessarily directly relevant here, because here we're dealing with the applicant and the restaurant's own property, the demonstrated intent at the state level was to continue to help these restaurants to continue to recover. Now we find ourselves again in a situation where it's looking like outdoor seating and the precautions we thought we were able to move away from maybe aren't that far in the rearview mirror. So with that backdrop, in a mess, what has been circulated to you is a revised local law. The only section that would be amended is section 136-5 for site plan approval, which, as I mentioned, originally provided that you could get an unlimited number of permits for 12 months. But if you got more than 5 permits, then you had to go for amended site plan approval. in light of the law that was enacted at the state level, which I failed to mention, I apologize. The law is only in effect for a year. So it was adopted on July 7th and it's scheduled to expire on July 7th, 2022. So it basically provides these restaurants an additional year of this leniency of being able to use outdoor dining. And so when we discussed it at the work session, the premise that was contemplated was to have this loss mirror the state law, given the policies and the interests that were in line with the state as well as the town board's thinking. So basically, it allows the continuation of the temporary outdoor dining permits, like I said, until July 7th, 2022. The two aspects of this law that are modified in light of these specific circumstances. So the temporary outdoor dining permit process stays in effect. What this is doing is carving out this exception that's in line with the state law. So until 2022, you can continue to get as many 45-day permits without the site plan approval requirement or the requirement to demonstrate the risk to public health, safety, and welfare. Because those were the two that in the beginning of July, when we were looking at this, we didn't know were necessarily going to be able to be satisfied under the circumstances. One thing to point out, which I originally didn't put in, this was also circulated to John Hamilton, the building inspector, and Valerie Vanastra, the town planner. And one of the things I presented to them as a question was, do we continue to have the 100% combined indoor and outdoor occupancy? And John Hamilton strongly encouraged that remain because of the issues you could start to have with parking and circulation if you're going to be looking at an occupancy that is exceeding what would be 100% of your maximum permitted indoor. So this would continue to require that to the extent restaurants are going to be utilizing outdoor space, they have to provide a plan to John that demonstrates a reduction of the same amount, the correlating number of spaces that they're creating outside so that you're not exceeding that 100%. And that's in order to ensure that until these restaurants, if and when they do make this a permanent fixture by going back in for amended site plan approval, you're maintaining to the greatest extent possible the status quo.
All right, everybody follow that? Basically, we're just extending it another year, to put it in simple terms. The idea is to extend what we already had going for another year to continue with the maximum requirement of it just being 100%. And basically to be in line with the extension of the governor had given this leniency to basically support businesses. We don't have a lot of restaurants in the town. There are about 5 maybe that have all taken advantage of this to date. We really don't want them to fail with the few restaurants that we do have. So this would be a way for us to continue to support. And I think all of us know we'd rather sit outside. I mean, most people would rather sit outside right now if they could. And I think, if you're going to be inside, especially now with the new mask mandates coming down the pike, it's just going to get even harder again for these restaurants. So I think that my personal opinion is that we need to do all that we can to support them. So if there's any comments on this,
Sorry, there was just actually one other aspect of this that I failed to mention, which is subsection 4, which basically provides that there's an end date, which is July 8th, 2022, and restaurants, when they start getting their permits from the day after this local law goes into effect, the building inspector is going to be notifying them. If on July 8th, 2022, you want to sit outside, you better have already gotten planning board approval by that point. This is your chance to continue, but we're not going to be in a position like we were this summer because we were all caught off guard when the state of emergency expired, so people didn't really have time to plan. Now restaurants are being told this is your time to plan.
I mean, yeah, and basically there's nothing that precludes them from going to a planning board now.
No.
Right, in this time. So they could look for something more permanent now, and then they wouldn't have to deal with these 45-day extensions.
Right, I agree with with the idea that, should they find they like the enhanced outdoor dining, they should be starting to go to the planning board now and not tie it up later. And I also agree with John Hamilton that, right now, while we're still unsure of where we're going, that if you put more tables outside the way people want them, you're also creating more space between the tables inside by keeping it at the 100%, therefore keeping people even safer. So I agree with his assessment of that.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Comments, questions, thoughts? Councilman Meyer, you if you have a thought and comment or question.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to extend it, and just my own personal experience again with kids. You know, kids can't get vaccinated. So I think for those of us with kids, or just in general, you know, I think everybody kind of wants to be outside still, and you know, hopefully this time next year that changes. But for now, I think it's safer to go this route.
No, I'm good.
Okay,
So procedurally, last week, the board called for a public hearing, which will be held next week.
okay. So it's good, and we post it, and it can be reviewed by the public, and we'll see everybody in public hearing. So thank you. Next up. Non-contentious cannabis. We are also continuing discussion tonight on the New York State Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, specifically in reference to whether or not the town should opt out of dispensaries and or on-site consumption in our jurisdiction. The Village of Austin board discussed at their last work session, last week, setting a public hearing for a local law to opt out of on-site consumption, but to do nothing on the issues of dispensaries, which by default would allow that use in the Village of Austin. There are some benefits for the town to follow suit with the village, including the potential for revenue share between the town and village for marijuana sales in the village that the town would lose out on if we were to opt out of both uses. We've also heard anecdotally from the county that a number of other Westchester municipalities are strongly considering a similar course of action, allowing dispensaries, but being more cautious with on-site consumption. Although we are still a few months away from the end of the year, the clock is definitely ticking for us to make a decision on this issue. It would not be the end of the time for talking if we did decide to opt out, as it would start a public hearing process. My personal opinion, I think the most responsible decision would be to follow Village of Austin's lead and set in motion the wheels to opt out of on-site consumption as we start working on an agreement between the town and village on revenue sharing for the dispensaries. I do, however, believe there are strong arguments on both sides regarding on-site consumption, so would love to hear more from my colleagues. So I put it up to you.
Well, I've been in favor of allowing the dispensaries with careful zoning and not in favor of the consumption. So I'm right on the same page with the village. So I'm good there. I agree with that.
Definitely not in favor of consumption, so.
Definitely not.
It's illegal.
I know, but I don't wanna,
It's illegal.
on site,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that.
Okay. I mean, I know that you weren't a huge fan of dispensaries either, but I feel like maybe you're in that position where you could
Yeah.
live with that.
I could live with that.
I haven't been a big fan of this from the beginning, and it hasn't gotten any better. But it's going to happen. I understand that, but I don't think it should be on-site consumption. I think do as you do your liquor store, take it and go wherever. And then you're gonna find all of these accidents happening because people driving and it's just, you know it's gonna happen. But I guess everybody can see money in it. So that's it. Money makes the world go round.
I mean, I do think that there's a social justice component to it as well, but I hear what you're saying, and I certainly do understand. I mean, I remember talking about this since I was in college, and the idea of being able to regulate something is in many ways, and tax it is in many ways gives you more control than than not being able to regulate it, right?
Yeah,
And so people still are gonna probably always get bad stuff, but this gives an opportunity to actually, and hopefully if it does get someday get approved at the federal level, get legalized at the federal level, that gives even a better opportunity to make it safer. So, will it ever be safe? No. Do people have access to it anyway? Yes. What is the way that we can make, find sort of a happy medium? It is legal in New York now, so, let's maybe take a look at how to find that happy medium, I guess, between not encouraging any of these, but making it, safer, I guess, is the way, and less penalties that would be associated with something that people are doing anyway, right? And that people are inequitably being penalized in many cases, and it really does fall on people of color who have been penalized.
and you look at it, and it's, if Austin don't, and Bradford do, and Croton do, you in the middle, you may well
Right.
join the game.
And I mean, since it's become legalized, we obviously have no shortage of access. If you walk through the parking lots of some of our parks, would hope people aren't smoking in the park cigarettes or anything else. But it would be nice to know that at least some of what people can get would be quality controlled. And as opposed to, there's not going to stop being access to lesser quality, let's call it, or questionable quality, or, with additions. So, the more quality controls availability, I think that's better. So,
And with that, we turn it over to Councilman Meyer. I think we all know your opinion, but go ahead, tell us.
Yeah, no, I still support it. I think it's, there's tax revenue. I think there's the ancillary benefit of having people sort of come to our town for a different thing, and maybe wanting to check out a restaurant, check out the waterfront, or things they haven't been introduced to. So I do support both aspects, but both the on-site and the dispensary. But I'd be comfortable moving forward with just the dispensary if that's what we can all agree to today, or whenever.
All right, so with that, I would turn it over to Councilman Toledano and ask for next steps, because I think what we would be asking to do is preparing a local law to opt out of the on-site consumption.
I don't think you have to ask me anything, that's the answer.
Yeah.
As just to refresh the recollection of the board, this is subject to permissive referendum, meaning that if a petition is filed by, I believe it's 10% of the voters in the town who voted in the last gubernatorial election within 45 days, then it would have to go to a special election.
And those 45 days kick in
After you adopt a local law. So a local law would be drafted, presumably at your meeting next week. The board can call for a public hearing to be held on the 24th. And then you would hold a public hearing just like any other. If the board is comfortable, you can close it that night and vote, or you can carry it over to your first legislative session in September. We'll take it from there. Yes, and then upon the adoption of the filing with the clerk and the applicable legal postings that have to be done, the 45-day period would start. And then if there is no adequate legal petition filed, the law goes into effect at the end of the 45-day period. If not, that would start the time for there to be an election, which we would cross that bridge if we got there. But given the parallel paths that the village and town are on, if both ended up in that situation, which I don't know how likely that is, perhaps there would be some way to move forward in tandem.
Makes perfect sense. All right, well, fantastic. Thank you for that ongoing discussion, and hopefully we can move forward thoughtfully and deliberately in a way that is, again, safe and also, I guess, enriching, I would say, to our community. So. So with that, I know there was potential discussion about, which we didn't put on the agenda, about changing meeting dates. Is that not something that we're gonna discuss? Okay, so you just need to touch base with the board. Okay, so with that, I would ask if I could have a motion to adjourn to executive session for advice of counsel and contracts.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, so much. And we will be back next week, August 10th, for a legislative session. Remember to be safe out there, wear your masks in here and whenever you can't social distance. And hopefully we can, and get vaccinated if you haven't already. Don't forget that part. That's most important. And hopefully we'll see you at the concert Friday night.